So now, there's no doubt from perusal of these provisions that different words have been used to meet different demands. In view of the great variations of the phrase used all throughout Constitution, it follows that the amendment must derive its color from Article 368 and the rest of the provisions of Constitution. There's no doubt that it is not intended that the whole of the Constitution could be repealed. This much is conceded by the learned counsels for the respondents. Therefore, in order to appreciate the real content of the expression amendment of this Constitution, in Article 368, I must look at the whole structure of the Constitution. The Constitution opens with preamble. The preamble is read. This preamble, indeed, the Constitution was drafted in light of direction of objective resolutions adopted on January 22nd, 1947. Okay, then the objective resolution is read. Okay, to draw up, okay, for future governance, then wherein the territories, okay, shall be union, all of them, wherein the state territories shall possess and retain the status of autonomous units together with the residuary powers and exercise all powers and functions of government and administration. 7 expects such powers and functions as are vested in so independence of state, okay, where at the same time they'll be conceding something to the union. Then independent government, social economic justice, adequate safeguards, all to be provided for minorities, backwards and tribal classes, areas and depressed and other backward classes. Okay, then so that this ancient land attains rightful and honored place in the world and makes its full and willing contribution to the promotion of world peace and welfare. While moving the resolution for acceptance of the objectives, resolution, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru says, it seeks very favorably to tell the world of what we have thought or dreamt for so long and what we hope to achieve in the near future. It is in that spirit that I venture to place this resolution, and then that resolution is placed. Okay. And may I, sir, also with the respect suggest to you that the House that when the time comes for the passing of this resolution, let it not be done in a formal way by raising of hands, but much more solemnly by all of us standing up and thus taking the pledge anew. I may here trace the history of shaping the preamble because this would show that preamble was in conformity with the Constitution and finally accepted. Then the preamble history is traced out. In the meantime, the process of merger integration and all that, how it went. The draft preamble was considered by the Assembly on October 17. Object of putting the preamble last, the President of Assembly explained, was to see that it was in conformity with the Constitution as accepted. Okay. Then our preamble outlines the Constitution, outlines the objectives of the whole of the Constitution. It expresses what we had thought and dreamt for so long. Okay. In Berubari versus Union, okay, an exchange of enclaves, it was said. There is no doubt that the declaration made by the people of India in exercise of the sovereign will in the preamble to the Constitution is the word of story, is the words of story, a key to open the minds of maker, which may show the general purpose for which they made the several provisions of Constitution, but nevertheless the preamble is not a part of the Constitution and as will be as observed about the preamble to the American Constitution. It has never been regarded as a source of substantive powers conferred on this government by the United States of India. So the debate in Berubari was whether preamble would be considered a part of Constitution. It was rejected on the sole ground that even United States doesn't consider it. What is true about the powers is equally true about prohibitions and limitations. Okay, so such powers embrace only those expressly granted in the body of Constitution and such as may be implied from those so granted. Vanchu Jain Golaknath said, On the parity of reasoning, we are of the opinion that the preamble cannot prohibit or control in any way or impose any implied prohibitions or limitation on the power to amend the constitution. So the powers have to be given expressly or they have to be implied by the powers which are given expressly. Okay. Moreover, the preamble cannot control the unambiguous language of the article of the constitution. Then, with respect to the court was wrong in holding as to how has been shown above that the preamble is not a part of the constitution unless the court was thinking of the distinction between the constitution statute and the constitution mentioned by Mr. Palkiwala. It was expressly voted to be a part of the constitution. Further, with the respect, no authority has been referred before us to establish the proposition that what is true about the powers is equally true about the prohibitions and limitations. As I will show later, even from the preamble's limitation have been derived in some cases. Okay, so what Justice Sikri is saying is that okay, it's wrong to say that the preamble was not a part of the constitution because it has been voted upon. Okay, and secondly, he rejects the theory that power, okay, are to be given expressly and prohibitions are to be implied from the powers given expressly. He says there's no authority to do that. It is urged in some written submissions, in the written submission of Mr. Palkiwala, that there is a distinction between Indian Constitution, statutes, and Constitution of India. This Constitution is the Constitution which follows the preamble. It starts with Article 1 and ends with, originally, with 8th schedule and now ends with 9th schedule after the First Amendment. The way the preamble is drafted leaves no doubt that what follows or is annexed to the preamble is the Constitution of India. So what is being said is that the Constitution is annexed to the preamble of India. Okay. He also heard that the preamble came to in force in such and such date, then let it go. Okay. He says that preamble is a part of the Constitution statute, or not a part of the Constitution, but precedes it. There is something to be said for this contention, but in my view, it's not necessary to base my decision on this distinction, as it is not necessary to decide in the present case whether 368 enables Parliament to amend the preambles. Parliament has not yet chosen to amend the preamble. You may recollect that subsequently even the preamble had been amended. Okay, so it becomes very much becomes a part of the constitution. The preamble was used by this court as an aid of construction in Behram Khurshid Eskiwala. Okay. These fundamental rights have not been put in the constitution merely for individual benefit, though ultimately they come up in operation in considering individual rights. They have been put there as a matter of public policy, and the doctrine of waiver can have no application to the provisions of law which have been enacted as a matter of constitutional policy. Similarly, in Kerala Education Bill 1957, okay, Chief Justice Das said, in order to appreciate the true meaning and import of the implications of the provisions of the bill, which are said to have given rise to doubts, it will be necessary to refer first to certain provisions of constitutions which may have a bearing upon the question under the consideration, and then to the actual provisions of the bill. The inspiring and nobly expressed preamble to our constitution records the solemn resolve of the people of India to constitute. Okay, nothing provokes or stimulates thought and expression in people more than education. It is education that clarifies our belief and faith and helps us strengthen our right to worship. To implement and fortify these supreme purposes set forth in preamble, Part 3 of our Constitution has provided for certain fundamentals. In Sajjan Singh's case, preamble is not of common run was told. Justice Madalkar said that look, it's not a preamble of an ordinary statute, it's a preamble of the Constitution of India. Okay. A preamble may be used for other reasons to limit the scope of certain expressions or to explain facts or to introduce definition. Then the Sophia Naturalization Act was it. There was nothing in the act or its preamble interpreted in the light of the earlier relevant statutes capable of controlling or limiting the plain and ordinary meaning of the material words enacting the provisions. Okay, Sophia Naturalization Act was in the British monarchy. Okay, anyone who was descended from Princess Sophia was naturalized. Okay, so that was continued for say at least 2 centuries. Okay, and that court question came, and the court said, "No, there's nothing in the statute of the preamble." Okay, then Balsa Severs quotes, "It is only when it conveys a clear, definitive meaning. When preamble can be used, when it cannot be used, is being considered right now." Uh, it is only when it conveys a clear and definite meaning in comparison with relatively obscure and indefinite enacting words that the preamble may legitimately be prevailed. So if there is any let's say that if there is a meaning which is being missed out or obscured meaning is being given, then only you can use preamble, otherwise not. On one hand, the proposition can be accepted. It is settled rule that preamble cannot be made to control the enactment themselves. Okay. On the other hand, it must often be difficult to say that any terms are clear and unambiguous until they have been studied in their context. This case shows that even reading of Article 368 in the context of Constitution, I find the word amendment ambiguous. What Justice Sikri is saying is, if I find the word amendment ambiguous, I can refer to the preamble to find which construction would fit in with the preamble. Otherwise, not. That's Then there's a sharp conflict of opinion in Australia respecting the question whether an amendment can be made, which would be inconsistent with the preamble of the Constitution Act. Apart from the rule, which excludes the preamble generally from consideration in a statutory interpretation, it is clear that when all is said and done, the preamble at the most is only a recital of the intention which the Act seeks to effect. It, that is preamble, is properly resorted to where doubts or ambiguities arise upon the words of the enacting part. For if they are clear and unambiguous, there seems little room for interpretation except in cases leading to an obvious absurdity or to a direct overthrow of the intention expressed in the preamble. And the story says, and the uniform doctrine of the highest judicial authority has accordingly been that it was the act of people and not of states, and that it bound the latter and the subordinate to the people. Let us turn, said Mr. Chief Justice J, to the Constitution. The people therein declare their design in establishing and comprehending this object, to form a more perfect union, to establish justice, to to ensure domestic tranquility, to provide for common defense, to promote general welfare, and to secure blessings of liberty to themselves and their posterity. It would be added, be pleasing and useful to consider and trace the relations which of each of these objects bear to others, and to show that collectively they compromise everything requisite and the blessings of divine providence to render the people prosperous and happy. So you can be prosperous and happy only with the blessing of the divine Almighty. Okay, United States was ordained and established not by the states in their sovereign capacities, but emphatically as the preambles of the Constitution declares by the people of the United States, and the language still more expressively will be found used in other solemn occasions. The Supreme Court of the United States, borrowing some of the language of the preamble of Federal Constitution, has appropriately stated that people of the United States erected their constitutions or forms of government to establish justice, to promote general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty, and to protect their persons and property from violence. In United States, the Declaration of Independence is sometimes referred to determining the constitutional questions. It seems to me that the preamble of our Constitution is of extreme importance, and the Constitution should be read and interpreted in the light of the grand and noble vision expressed in the preamble. Then he proceeds briefly to describe the scheme of the Constitution, part one and all that. He'll be reading that. Okay, so for the time being, we'll just stop over there.